expand the vast unknown. And this new life is cast.
Jamie, hi. We're here. We're landed. We're alive. We are here.
Yeah. Good to be with you, man.
It's so good to be with you. You have you've instructed me in so many ways, and most especially your invitation for me to do that wilderness first responder training from our last conversation. And so I just want to start with, first of all, just a lot of gratitude to you for being here, for showing up as you always do. I really appreciate you.
For sure, man. Yeah, and you know, Burners Without Borders is a project near and dear to my heart. It's very easy. I find myself often in a position of critiquing transformational culture for the things it's not doing. And Burners Without Borders is just a shining example of what it can be doing. And so I'm really, you know, honored and grateful to be able to share on this platform with you.
Thank you. Yeah, and that's why I ended up finding my way to BWB as well. So I camped with BWB last year. And a big shout out to Burners Without Borders, to everyone involved in the camp at Burning Man, to everyone involved in the worldwide community. It's just amazing what happens with this particular little alcove of Burning Man. And there are many, many others that are doing cool things too. Yeah, I love BWB. I feel so inspired by I feel inspired by Burners Without Borders as doers, as it's not just talks, it's not just the personal brand and the shamanic ecstasies of transformation. It's like going into disaster areas, putting things back together, just really building and doing. And I'm so excited about this group of people and being with them because I learned so much from them.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, I don't know what, you know, we all have different experiences on the Playa, but for me, almost every year, there's some version of like 2 or 3 a.m. looking around at all the mayhem popping off, and you're like, holy shit, what is this? Like, what is this thing? And, you know, where are we? And even when are we? You know, and it feels like sort of the intersection of every when and never was, you know, and you're like, well, what on earth is this strange, self-organizing, amorphous thing? And it really has felt like a sandbox for the future. It feels like we're sort of coming unstuck in time to explore both, you know, the ancient and the not yet in a sort of future rustic kind of combo. You're like, is this 5th century BC and we're like tripping Hebrews in the desert, you know, looking for the burning bush, or is this like, you know, Buck Rogers in the 25th century? And you really can't tell. And it has always felt like to me that, yeah, it's been somewhat of training for the apocalypse, basically, for the eschaton, you know. And it feels like Burners Without Borders has been one of the groups that sort of picked up that thread of we're here to do something more than simply be here. We are here to gather in order to prepare. And that specific thread of burner culture has fascinated me much more than simply the Lotus Eaters, you know, who are simply sort of unstuck in time, but no particular place to go.
I like that you brought up Lotus Eaters, because one of the things I like about you is the poetry with which you share. And of course, the Lotus Eaters are from the Odyssey, the land of the Lotus Eaters, where we go to forget. And that's such a risk with this culture, is do we go to learn and then act in the world and then serve others and bring this culture out in a beautiful way? Or do we go to forget? Do we go to tap into that peak experience that feels so good so that we can go on to the next peak experience? You know, and it's easy to, the whole point of the land of the Lotus Eaters is that you start to forget. You know, Odysseus himself, who is the many-minded Odysseus, the wisest of all the Greeks, still forgot in the land of the Lotus Eaters. And so I think that that's a really apt parallel. And I just love your poetry, Jamie. So I have a quick question though, in terms of this world that could be anywhere, that could be 500 BC. Have you played around in any of these multiverses? Have you experienced the attempt of building Burning Man in other realms? Have you played around at all yet?
Not yet. No, we're going to be doing something. I think the Playa Alchemist crew are doing something in partnership with Microsoft, and I'm giving a talk with Daniel Schmachtenberger and Wade Davis. sometime. I think it's this weekend. So I'll be bumbling my way around and trying to show up an avatar form there too.
So that's BRCVR, and I actually, yeah, I was in there last night, and it made me so homesick, Jamie. I was like, I haven't played in VR that much, and it
Mhm.
really felt like the Playa, like with that kind of distant music, and then bumping into someone, and I jumped on a Mayan Warrior and started beatboxing because there wasn't a DJ, you know, like,
Wow.
like you know, participatory, trying to do the thing. And when you were just speaking about how it could be anywhere, any when,
Mhm.
as we move into the multiverse, and who knows what the world will look like and how much time we'll be needing to spend in digital realms to connect, it's interesting to watch burners begin to experiment with that. You know, we're currently broadcasting through Infinite Playa at the moment, which is one of the 8 multiverses, and that's BRCVR. There's a number of them. It's interesting to see how this culture can explore the digital space. And I'm curious, as we're talking about Burners Without Borders as a kind of like lighthouse of doing, I'm interested what you might imagine Burning Man culture might be at its best in the digital realm.
Gosh. I mean, who
Starting
knows?
small, starting an easy question. It's easy
Well,
off the top.
I mean, the thing is that I think it was in 2017, actually, I gave a talk at Red Lightning, and it was just after Ceiling Fire had come out. And I think that was the 30th anniversary. So there was kind of a nice bookend and kind of a look back to the origins of this community and culture. And at the time, it just kind of popped out of my mouth. But I was like, you know what, folks? I think we might want to just call it. Like, this might have been a rad 3 decades. Let's go out on top. Let's not ride it into the dirt, and let's then take this out in the world, take all this energy and do something with it. And I know that like last year, the burn coincided with burning California, and this year we are up to our tits in pain and grief and disruption around the world. And there's that sense of like, well, wait, we still get to do the excess bacchanal thing, setting shit on fire and incredible amounts of calorie burn and cash burn and infrastructure to a place that is effectively ephemeral. Um, what do we do with this culture? Because my deep feeling is that the psychotechnology of it, like the thing that Danger Ranger articulated it beautifully. He said this is a beautifully designed transformation engine, and it changes people. And you've got inputs and you've got outputs, and you've got the environment and it breaks you down, and you've got the ecstatic experiences that crack you open, and it works. And it works in a way that is incredibly rare and precious in this day and age. And that's what, and that has that sort of ancient and timeless epiphanic ritual to it. And at the same time, it seems to be, we seem to be, I don't know what it is, but downloading starlight would be an approximation. There seems to be some extra sensory glimpsing of non-local time space that can occur. And I don't want to presume to speak for folks, but it sure as shit seems like that, right? It seems like there's like wormholes and stargates. Like when that, again, back to that 2 to 3 a.m. moment, like when that stuff starts just kind of opening up and there's portals all around you, you're like, whoa, what have we done? What have we built? And it feels like, a capstone on the Eleusinian mysteries. It feels like it's a postmodern mashup mystery school that is entirely open source and participatory. So all that said, that this is the largest, most potent, transformative ritual quite likely ever on this planet. Now you could take Kumbh Mela and something like that in India and a handful of other ones that are comparable in scope or bigger. But as far as the number of people that for sure get their socks knocked off, I don't know. There's a pretty high hit rate on the Playa. Maybe it feels like it's been dipping a bit lately. Like it used to be that if someone else was a burner, you could pretty much, it was like initiates into a secret society. And there was a degree of instantaneous, like, oh, you hold that resonant frequency, I hold that resonant frequency, let's meet here. I've noticed that seeming to dip a little bit in the kind of Instagram tech bro era, where some people are just going to kind of check the box of the been there, done that element, but still, that initiatory experience isn't for nothing. You know, I mean, I think the closest thing we had before that was Grateful Dead culture. And the question about what do we do with this going forward? I think first is to understand how both precious and ephemeral and potent and essential and otherwise absent that's initiatory psychotech is, and then also think, holy shit, we're all in a walk-on part in the war these days. It's going to get worse before it gets better. And how do we preserve and cherish this light that we have all been blessed to glimpse out in the dust and carry it forward through the storm?
So you started by saying that maybe after 3 decades, it's time to let go of this place. And then you went on with this gorgeous description of why it's so incredible as this initiatory container. So if we do let go of this place, if either we choose to or we're forced to, how do we then help to initiate others into this expansiveness that then can be taken out into the world? If there's no Burning Man, where do we find our modern illusion, what's the word, for the rituals? You wrote about it so much. Where do we find the new version of that?
Well, it feels like, I mean, the neat thing is that culture is forever appropriating itself, right? So the idea of like somebody throwing a flag on cultural appropriation, and yes, there's egregious examples like war bonnets and stuff like that. But in general, I mean, we are forever a polyglot mashup, constantly reinventing ourselves and paving over old stuff and digging up even older stuff and repurposing it. And so even something like the advent of immersive participatory theater like Sleep No More, which has not only popped off in New York, but then London, and has now become, an entire category or genre of experience design. The same thing with Meow Wolf. You can take a look, and so you see these ripples and instantiations. You see it in VR design and all the amazing talent that has come to this multiverse experience this year. So we sort of, on the one hand, that we don't need a playbook. Culture just happens. It's how we do this human thing. And we will see 1,000 mutations, permutations, fragmentations of it. And on the other, there's something, I mean, if anybody's been to Tony Hsieh's Downtown Project in Vegas, and I haven't been in several years, but I do know that like when he first had a couple of exhibits, like I think there was the praying mantis and a few other things, and I remember seeing them out of context, there they are in Vegas, not on the Playa, and feeling how less impactful they were. You're like, oh, that's just a widget. That's a gadget. That's a gewgaw. That's not one of 300 things that blew my mind today. And the scope and the scale, the assemblage of everything on the Playa, the sheer overwhelming strangeness and enormity of it all is part of its potency. And I would imagine that regional burns wrestle with that, which is how do we have that much oomph in our sacred psychotech? So on the one hand, fragmentation, mutation, we're going to keep doing what we do, and anyone who's glimpsed it, it's going to be in their mind's eye and have expanded their adjacent possible. And on the other hand, man, there is something that is very hard to replicate. Because of the beauty and the concentration and the scale. I mean, if it is argued, like if you see like the Mayan calendar of the city, and then it all focuses onto the man and then hits the temple, and you're like, this is like that movie Contact. Like we've just built a giant human radio dish to like beam it on up to the mothership, and that fucker is huge. With all sorts of like little primate, nervous systems wired up together in serial to send that beam out into the cosmos. And so that part, man, you're right. I'm ambivalent. I'm super ambivalent. I would be really sad to not know that it's out there somewhere on this earth going off.
So let's say we make it work. We support the org. We get through COVID as we are able to, and Burning Man persists. Part of what we're trying to do in this speaker series that we've put together in the Multiverse is to look at what the next 10 years of Burning Man might look like. So my question to you is, you alluded to this kind of like tech bro period in Burning Man culture. And I think a lot of folks are like, oh, it's jumped the shark, or it's not as good. I mean, people are always saying that Burning Man's always getting ruined. But looking at the place we're at right now, both at Burning Man and also just what's going on in the world, what's going on politically in this country, what would you most like Burning Man to be, to evolve into? How should Burning Man change in the next 10 years? And when you answer this question, I'd just love you to think about the listeners who may be part of BWB or other camps who do have the ability to act and change and shift this culture. How would you like to see this culture evolve and grow over the next 10 years if Black Rock City persists?
Yeah. Well, I mean, you know, and I had a conversation with Marion about this a year ago, I think, maybe it was January. It was January before the wheels came off. I was like, hey, Marion, I really would love to see this start happening. What do you think? And I totally get the org's not on the hook for it, but what if we could, as a community, do this, which is, you know, potentially just move our sliders a little bit on hedonism versus activism, basically. And back to that idea of, you know, this being a sandbox for the future. You know, the way that, I mean, I think that LNT, I mean, I taught LNT for decades as a mountain.
LNT, what is LNT?
Leave no trace. So the idea is where the MOOP scores come from, and the great ethos, because it's on BLM land. That's why Burning Man ended up with it. But it's actually, you know, it's a standard of mountain guiding and everything else, which is that one person dropping a gum wrapper or walking off the trail doesn't matter much, you know, but 1,000 people going to someplace beautiful like Archers or Zion will just trash the place over time, right? So Burning Man picked up that ethos from best practices in the wilderness. But, you know, it always struck me as like, it's a great like social program for sure. But it's also got a sort of crypto Puritan undertone, which is that we aren't supposed to be here, you know, and that our presence as humans make this place worse. So we want to minimize our footprint versus, instead of leave no trace, what about make a mark? And we know that Envision's doing that. We know the Multiverse is doing that. They have different land arrangements that allow them to, right? But rather than striking it and disappearing it, they're actually accruing culture, accruing infrastructure over time. And so that, you know, and Fly Ranch is obviously a move in that direction for, you know, it's not nearly as democratized or open access, but it is a beginning. It's an experiment in that direction. And I think that, you know, what I would love to see is that, you know, the Esplanade and the sound camps, et cetera, instead of just having MOOP scores of how well did we not make a dent, have something along the lines of like soup scores or like sustainability scores. So Burners Without Borders would be a great case in point. BlackRock Solar, the idea like, if you're going to have prime time frontage at this celebration of human culture, then let's make sure that what we're showcasing isn't just a bumping function one stack, you know, although God bless them, right? But the idea of like, this is who we are. This is what we've been up to the other 11 months. These are our connections. These are our innovations. And I mean, we see it all over, right? There are folks that have amazing gray water systems. There are folks that are doing solar paneled swamp coolers. There's lots of things that are being the Hexayurt program. Like, I mean, there's so many that have a, what's the right word? I don't know. I mean, an open membrane between other needs in the world. Because I mean, look, we need food security. We need sustainable energy. We need affordable housing. We need ways to gather together and manage conflict, right? We need all these things. And the Playa has been a great incubator. And I would just love, like I said, just the sliding scales of hedonism to activism. Let's just adjust them a little. And what if we had, you know, let's just say a couple of nights of absolute throwdown blowouts and a couple of nights of, you know, like, hey folks, it's a little like the Lakota. I mean, this is just an example, right? But how did they do the human thing back then, right? They waited until the summer where there was a time of maximum, you know, the buffalo grass was tall on the plain. So that was a lot of like starlight turned in through the miracle of photosynthesis into something horses and buffalo could eat, you know, metabolism, and that equaled high battery charge. So the nation could come together and there was lots of starlight to consume. And then the star, our star starts fading, and what do we do in the summer? Like you gather together 100,000 strong and you say, this is who we are. These are our stories. We mourn and bury our dead just like we do at the temple, right? We make plans for peace and war. We marry, right? We do like it's everything, right? I mean, everything is still echoed in the Playa. And then as our star starts fading to the equinox and the solstice, what do? Well, we break from a nation into a tribe, from a tribe into a band, and then ultimately for the hunker down tough times, just to a family up a creek, doing our little thing. And that kind of ebb and flow between both the scale of our gatherings and the available energy, that we come together to renew our stories and our sense of shared identity, but we also bring what's happening in that world to the Playa. That feels important too. And I think there's been a little bit of our hashtag best life avatar selves coming to the Playa. Like I might not be able to make fucking rent, but it doesn't matter because I'm going to put on my bindi and, and my feathers, and I'm just going to fucking rage for a week and just pretend that part of me doesn't exist, versus saying, hey, this is us. And it's a 365-day experience and community versus just a 7-day.
This reminds me of the idea that you put forth in Stealing Fire about a hedonic calendar. And I've always loved that idea because it can be so intoxicating to have these experiences like Burning Man or like a psychedelic ceremony. And so we kind of try to leap from peak to peak. We want to come back to that feeling. And you presented this idea of a hedonic calendar where, as you've just kind of described, there's a time for that ecstasis, but there's also, you have to pace it and you have to bring some structure and discipline. And I think one of the things that we're seeing in Burning Man culture, and I've felt in my own life, is such an incredible love and passion for the connectivity we feel out on Playa, for the art, for everything. It's so good. We just want it again. So then we're going to Mexico to do like the next thing. And then we're going to fly into the Southern Hemisphere to do the next thing. And it's this, and I think that's probably one of the aspects of our culture, some parts of our culture, that I think is most harmful because it's very wasteful. It causes a lot of, it's very privileged. And I'm curious, has your idea of the hedonic calendar evolved or changed at all as the world is seeing more crises? Could a hedonic calendar also kind of dovetail with some kind of service calendar as well? Like, is there another version that works with it that would help us kind of have real balance in our lives so we can have that one big moment, get our downloads, whatever it is, and then be able to integrate and serve and have that be paced in such a way that we sort of understand our cycles? Has your thinking about that evolved?
Well, I mean, I not in the sense that I've sort of jimmied with the idea of the hedonic calendar. I think the idea, and just, for folks that aren't familiar, it's just the idea of just pacing how high we get, how often, basically. And that idea of your daily practices are all the awesome foundationals. Do your push-ups and your yoga and say your prayers, right? And, unless you become totally OCD, you almost can't do too much of those good things because that's building your antenna, right? That is literally increasing your ability to pick up signal of source. And then there are the more ecstatic techniques, and that could be reclaiming a Sabbath, and that starts with unplugging your router. It could be, lovemaking with a partner. It could be time in nature. It could be deep meditation sits, you name it. Again, once a week, probably still not that edgy, broadly healthy, but giving you a definite hit of a real state shift, all the way to the once a month, once a season, once a year, and the once a years could be all the way to the full week, where a burn fits nicely, right? And the idea there is that rather than going 0 to 100, back to 0, back to 100, and sort of constantly basically blowing ourselves sky high and then spending months picking up the pieces, or sort of binging and purging, where I might go down the rabbit hole of psychedelics or cannabis use or sexuality or anything, and then have to like quit because I no longer trust my own judgment in that space. But then I sort of cease to cook myself in the way that we would want to, right? In alchemy, you just pace it. And you just have a sense of, you get a good, head of steam up in a Vipassana retreat or a trip to Peru or a trip to the Playa. And then you just do the micro and meso practices, the little ones and the middle ones, to keep that thing spinning. My sense is that in between all that is life. And an enormous part of life is service. So I'm not sure that, like, there is always the service to be done. There is always the work to be done. And I think that if as a community, we emphasized and highlighted and spotlighted, like boosted the signal for folks of those opportunities and those needs, then people, when they're sort of torn, they're like, okay, I'm coming off I've still got my afterglow, I'm feeling really juiced and groovy. What do I do now? If there was like, here's a bucket, right? Here's a shovel, here's a paintbrush, like, come help. Then we would find helpers high, right? We would find that sense of engagement because I'm at loose ends. I've seen the sun and the moon. I want change. I want it all to be here. It's not. And then I get increasingly sad or deflated. But if it's like, hey, be a part of the solution. Burn is Without Borders, right? I mean, even just on social feeds in the last 6 months has shown up in disaster areas in North America, fires and coastal storms. They've shown up in Black Lives Matter protests. They've shown up in urban medical relief and those kinds of things. They're showing up, and they're showing up sort of beyond a strict mandate of what they might have, started with or done. And I feel like really just need that. We need signposts and examples of this is what it looks like to be awake and engaged versus awake and then crawling up our own asses to just see exactly how awake we could possibly get.
Speaking of boosting service signals, I just want to give a huge shout out to what BWB has been doing with these community roundups. Have you heard about this? It's a bi-weekly meeting, and we're actually going to be hosting one today at 5 to 7, and it'll be the first time that it's broadcast. But essentially what happens is different groups that are doing different service projects show up. They get a really short period of time to pitch, which is great because we all love talking, but they get a short pitch. And then they're like, okay, this is what we need. I have this project where I'm doing housing for frontline medical workers. We want to get these folks housed near hospitals. Who can help me out? Where can we connect? And it's literally just every 2 weeks, this super like short pitch. And it's exactly what you've just described. It's boosting these signals. And so I want to boost that signal and say that if you're checking out our speaker series in Infinite Playa or on Facebook, we're going to do that at 5. And then I'm going to throw it back to you, Jamie, and say, what signals would you most like to boost right now? I mean, there's so much the world needs politically, the fires, the pandemic. But what for people who are just listening right now, who are like, yeah, I want a service high. I'm done with just the me high. I've done enough of that. I want a service high. I want to be with people. I want to be inspired. And not necessarily even an individual project, but can we direct people to places? Can we boost that signal? Can we make it cool to go there?
Well, I mean, look, the short answer is yes, and in no way am I a hub of that information. That information is bioregional, it's local, it's urban, and so like plug in, look around, ask for help. But there is something I would encourage, and I think it's going to be increasingly important, which is the old adage of like, before taking a splinter out of your neighbor's eye, take the 2x4 out of your own. And so this is the conversation you and I had, right? Which prompted you to go and get your wilderness medical training, which was, as conditions continue to potentially get increasingly unstable, we can just leave it at that. There's going to be this increasingly schizophrenic toggling between, hey, do I have enough energy to help, or do I need help? And basically it'll be a sort of a sliding scale of myself. And if I've got myself on lock, I'm sleeping, I'm well rested, I've got economic security, food security, all these things. Okay, great. I've got enough energy to then care lovingly for my family, chosen or biological. If everybody there is sorted and grounded, then I can reach out and I can help lead my community, my country, the world. But if I take a hit, if there's a degradation in my conditions, then boo, back to the bottom of the slide. Someone just kicks you in the balls or stabs you in the back, and suddenly it's me now in my pain.
It's shoots and ladders, basically. It's a big game of shoots and ladders.
And it's going to be constantly oscillating depending on conditions. And so the first thing that I would strongly encourage folks is do what we need to do so that we can be part of the solution. And that means looking off, and it doesn't mean I'm going to be selfish and retreat to my, billionaire's bunker in New Zealand. It doesn't mean those kind of things. It means, but it does mean, can I care for myself and the people closest to me such that we can then raise our hands and say, hey, we're in this to win this, and we can stay on the front lines for as long as possible.
Something in terms of service and taking care of the world and helping out that is really befuddling me is the enormity of division on every single subject. And I tend to fall, pretty well to the left of pretty much everything always. Oh, we got a little Jamie Wheal at the moment spinning. Do I have you on audio? I've lost your video.
Yeah, I am still here.
You're still here. No, we just have a little wheel on the Zoom here. So now it's just the Jamie Wheal and me conversation. I'll continue with the question. So I'm befuddled by division in that I feel like I can speak to certain people, but I can't speak at all to other people. The fact that whether or not one should wear a mask whilst we're in a pandemic, that is a political issue that stimulates such anger and fervent disagreement is enormously frustrating. And then if you look at like the kind of psyops, kind of attacking people on the left to say, Trump is a light worker, vote for Trump. And then I'm having conversation. Oh, now it's a whole spin around wheel. So then I'm having conversations with people on the left who've been, I feel, kind of co-opted by. This is quite the multiverse experience, Jamie, because I'm getting so many fun, different little looks of you.
I'm completely, I'm 100% following your questioning. So please keep going on.
Well, essentially, I'm just curious if you have, perhaps personally, or with the different communities that you speak to, some ideas about how we can heal some divisions, both in this country and then, of course, it's happening internationally, so that we can be more collaborative against some of these challenges, because it is honestly, it's just so frustrating to feel that this country is at each other's throats on even the smallest issues. So how do we work with that aspect of things?
Well, look, I mean, this brings us full circle to what we talked about in the beginning, which is that the psychotechnology of Burning Man being so precious. And what it allows us to do is not just ecstasis, not just peak experiences or shooting the moon, right? It also allows for profound healing, and it also allows for incredibly close bonds in our shared humanity. And that flywheel of inspiration, healing, connection is never a one and done. We might have our profound breakthrough experiences, our first burn, whatever that might be, but like life goes on. We might wash ourselves clean and then it's time to do a swan dive back into the mud. And so what it really feels like right now is that collectively we are both waking up to the nature of things. We are becoming less distracted, fragmented consumers. And at the same time, we are choking on our undigested grief. And that, if you've ever experienced grief or you've ever seen someone in grief, it's not logical, rational, or linear. And it lashes out, and it just simply needs to get out of the human that it threatens to destroy. And not only is there a lot of absolutely authentic and legitimate pain in our sort of zeitgeist, in our shared sense of things, but there's also fuckwits and agitators taking chisels to those fault lines and beating on them for all they're worth. So we are absolutely having our wounds salted, even as we're trying to come to healing. So there is no way around this. This is soul force or bust. I'll tell you what I'll do. I think I will just, because I'd love to be with you visually. So let me just see if I can, where's my broader thing? Let's just do this. Did this get me somewhere? It says it's supposed to. Well, I'll tell you what, we're just going to deal with absolute best voice. Hopefully you guys can be with us on this.
I'll try to have really dynamic facial reactions so that people are like, oh, no shit, he said that.
No, I mean, I think it's very straightforward. It's soul force or bust. You know, either we make a decision. And this is what's sort of both fascinating and so fucking problematic around our current non-hierarchical progressive movements. You know, like it's sort of like it's the antithesis of the great man theory of history. You know, you don't wait for a singular leader on top of a hierarchy to tell people where to go and what to do. And we did that with Occupy. That's happening with Black Lives Matters. It's happening across the protest movements right now. And on the one hand, you know, amen, right? Much more democratic, much more inclusive, many more voices that haven't been heard getting to be heard. So essential. And on the other hand, satyagraha, like what Gandhi held down, what King held down as soul force, is a rare frequency. And that ability, and it is effectively Christ consciousness by any other name. It is to say, forgive them for they know not what they do, but we're going to take the high road anyway. And when we, you know, and so crowdsourced leadership is profoundly beautiful when there is a shared and coherent unfolding, and it's on a razor's edge with bloodthirsty mob. And satyagraha, right, the ability for an avatar human to say, I mean, you know, this is no different than like hippie drum circles on the beach in Venice, right? If you have 3 West African fucking drummers with some djembes and junjuns in the center, then the whole thing comes together and it sounds like music. And the next night, the 3 West Africans aren't there and it's fucking mush. And nothing.
What you just described sounds so fun right now in the time of COVID. I want to go there so bad. I want to be with those drums right now.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And, you know, that to me is when you talk about the division, it's understanding what's happening right now. Like we are literally choking on our undigested grief. And if we don't have the capacity for these renewals to wipe the slate clean, to remember what we forgot, to remember what our true purpose is, to understand our brokenness and either mend it as we can or accept it, right? Because we now have enough joy. This is no different than the MDMA PTSD therapy, right? It's not that it's really one and done. You don't pop 150 milligrams of Molly and you're right, you know, you're right as rain. You know, otherwise we'd have a bunch of Jedi floating around, right? It's the idea is like, oh my God, I now have enoughness. I have enoughness to be able to feel into my deepest woundings and just own them instead of disowning them. And when we do those two things, when we do the ecstasis remembering and we do the catharsis healing and acceptance, unless we're in a broom closet someplace, we're doing it with others. And they're with, for, and through each other. And then that gives us something profound, which is communitas, which is like, this is my brother, you know, like it's that old Peter Gabriel tune, right? Find your brothers and sisters who can hear all the truth in what you say. You know, they can support you when you're on your way. That's that shaking the tree, right? Like shaking the motherfucking tree. And if we can do that, then we get to do the Ram Dass bit of walking each other home. And like, as we walk each other home, and we might even have a little shimmy shake in the step, we're going to step on each other's toes. So we need something, we need basically a social technology of batch forgiveness.
Ooh, is that like truth and reconciliation kind of situation?
Yeah, except I think it's the Groove and Reconciliation Committee. Because right after you've sweated your prayers together, right, there's just some of that shit that we had to work out. We worked out on the dance floor in 3 moves and a smile, right? We worked it out because I no longer have that static charge. And it's just like, hey, it's all good. It's all good. And so it's forgive us for what we have done and for what we have left undone. And if we can do that collectively, creatively, joyfully together, then we have a chance to kind of like shake the Etch-a-Sketch clear and then just start on Monday mornings. Because like if we have to sit down in goddamn talking circles, practicing nonviolent communication and, you know, passing the talking stick for every single little slight and grievance that we've ever accrued, we'll never get to the starting line of everything that's got to be done.
I've been in communities like that, and
Oh, fuck's
it
sake.
is very tedious.
It's beyond tedious, you know. Because what happens, and I there's a fascinating new study. I think it's out of the University of Melbourne or maybe Western Australia, but it was studying non-traditional socio-political movements right now, and it looked at white identitarians, it looked at progressives, and then it looked at, you know, basically authoritarian leftists, like my way or the highway, and it surveyed them for authoritarianism and dark triad personality traits. And that
What are the dark triad personality traits?
it's narcissism, Machiavellianism, and psychopathy. So
Yikes.
generally not nice stuff, right? and interestingly, it found that people who were in the middle, who said, "Hey, we're on Team Human. I believe what I believe, and I also want to honor and preserve other people's right to believe what they want and choose to believe." They didn't score. They didn't hit on any of those four, but both the authoritarian left and Aryan right did. And so you realize, oh shit, that's interesting. It's not that the movement for multicultural inclusion isn't 1,000,000% legitimate. It is to say, not unlike the French Revolution, beware of dark triad personalities who will sneak in and take over an otherwise noble movement and will then use it for power games that actually subvert or undermine the integrity and the heart of the movement that drew so many otherwise good folks and well-intentioned folks to it. And again, it's no different than the French Revolution, right? Danton was one of the original dudes, and he would liberty, equality, you know, equality and fraternity, brotherhood, right? And then Robespierre sneaks in, right, and clips them by tacking to the left and the Reign of Terror. These are things for us to pay attention to, and endless processing is a place where these movements get captured by dark triad folks.
I wanted to talk about something, and I wasn't sure if I could pull it in, but I think I could with this moment.
Great.
I miss shenanigans. When I first went, when I first went to Burning Man, I was not on like the steroids of personal growth that I have been in the past few years. It wasn't like all of the talks and all of the learning and teaching, and I got to get better and I got to get stronger and I got to do this thing. It was a lot more play and a lot more like coyote energy and a lot more shenanigans. And so as the world is more and more serious, and as service is more and more important, there's a fear, and in Burning Man culture itself, that we miss the hilarious shenanigans, the wicked, silly, ridiculous, cowboy, pirate, stupid behavior. And I wanted to find a place to like bring it in, but maybe a place for that coyote energy is the disruption of these kind of tacking too hard in one direction and kind of having this dark energy that takes over these otherwise lofty pursuits. Perhaps it's the shenanigans that can come in and destabilize that. Because if there's 10 more years of Burning Man, has to have lots of shenanigans. We have to play pranks on each other, or, you know, we don't want to lose that part in all of our intoxicating personal growth.
Yeah, absolutely. And a full hat tip, right, to the original DNA with the Cacophony Society and everything else, which was, I mean, I think if Burning Man had simply been what it seems like it's kind of become, which is the Illuminati, West Coast Marin, sound bath, cacao ceremony, everybody dressing in linen and fucking wafting feathers around, you know, it should have died an early death. It would have been far too self-serious, right, to actually have the amazing, vibrant energy, because there was that punk rock trickster element. There was always popping a balloon, no matter how, you know, if it got too big for its britches.
Yeah, popping the balloons. That's right. It. Popping the balloons.
And that is, and again, I mean, what we're seeing in this last 6 months, really 2020, has been basically a descent down the fucking toilet bowl of magical thinking. And whether that's virus conspiracies or global cabals or whatever, and I mean, it's ripping the, you know, Conchi culture up to pieces. And part of that is taking ourselves too seriously and believing a reality tunnel that we get sucked down. you know, and like Robert Anton Wilson, you know, who wrote the Illuminati, he was kind of friends with Tim Leary, kind of one of the great 70s trickster psychedelic pranksters. You know, he talked about that. He talked about reality tunnels and the idea of like don't just think that just because you broke your old suburban straight life reality tunnel that you're not, and your new ayahuasca, we're chasing anaconda through the Milky Way, you know, is all of existence. It's not. It's just a brighter, shinier, additional reality tunnel. And the game isn't to just swap apps on your phone, you know, like, oh, that's the old one from '08. This new one has got all kinds of cool features. It's to say, what does my home screen look like? Can I actually hold all of that? And when we succumb to piety or certainty, we get sucked into the reality tunnel. We become ensnared in our app. And the trickster prankster element is always to be, not so fast, buddy, right? A nom no wink and maybe a hard elbow if needed, right? To make sure that we get the fucking joke.
Well, and that's part of the strange serendipitous magic of Burning Man too, are the absolute fiascos. You know, it's like you have these lofty ideas of this exquisite art card and everyone's going to love you and you're going to get so laid and it's going to be so good. And then the Playa is just like, no, you ran out of gas. Sorry. Like, no, it's not, you know, like the Playa itself, I think, brings that trickster energy. And if it isn't the dust, if it isn't the dust storms, then certainly some asshole with a megaphone is going to kind of cut through some. So that part of the culture, I think, needs to be preserved and honored, and also needs to be carried out into the world along with this growth, along with this service. Like, we need to bring the coyote too, and we need to keep the coyote sacred in what we're doing.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and this is this is a deep cut if anybody wants to go there with me, but because I'm literally just researching it right now. But weirdly, that is a uniquely the absence of the coyote energy as an integration is actually a uniquely Judeo-Christian pathology, and it goes all the way back to the Old Testament, New Testament, where the Hebrew originally the original rabbis, like writing the book of Job and shit like that, were like, God he's omnipotent and he's benevolent. So basically, alone in the Judeo-Christian tradition, compared to all the other mythologies around the world, is the problem of evil. Because if God is all powerful and all good, then how the fuck does bad shit happen? And actually, like the book of Job, where Job gets the shit kicked out of him by God just to see if he'll still stay faithful. There was actually like 3 different writers, and the third one had to introduce the character of Satan, because otherwise the story did not make any sense. And you're like, why is God being such a dickhead if he's all powerful and all good? So like, and all the other societies, you look at the Greek gods, they are fickle as fuck. You look at the Hindu gods, you look at all the African and Native American gods, they're always the tricksters. The tricksters embody it all. Sometimes they'll help you, sometimes they'll school you, and it depends on how they feel, and it depends how you show up. And that ephemeral, good luck, bad luck, who knows, what me worry, right? Like that element, that cosmic prank energy got steamrolled out of the Judeo-Christian tradition, and we've spent 2,000 years trying to close the gap, right? So I think to your point, I think it's essential, because at the end of it all, what could we possibly know about the vastness and the mystery?
I'm so happy we did Trickster today, Jamie. I didn't know if we would get to Trickster, but I think and even when we're talking about the divisiveness in our country too, it's like we're in these such extreme, it is this way, I know it's this way. And just that upset is so important and so valuable. So it isn't just the shamanic transformation of like, I'm awake because I've expanded into the cosmos. Sometimes I'm awake because some asshole badger trickster god came and poked me where my soft spot is, and I've got to react and realize, oh shit, I'm alive. I'm just a human. I'm just a silly pink or creature, whatever this is. It just moves around the world. I am that, and that's actually kind of that's kind of okay to just be that. It's okay to just be a person.
Yeah, and it's more than just okay. It sort of feels like anything else is our road to damnation or fascism, right? And that the royal road is truly in the embrace of like, hey man, fucking hey, like life is tragic. We get that. If we're super lucky, occasionally we get the glimpse that it's also magic. like amen, drop me to my knees in gratitude. And the toggling between those two is so baffling, so crazy making, that it's also comic. Because like if we couldn't laugh at this, we'd die. And so like that triangle of tragic, magic, comic feels like it's the sort of, it's the home base of life. And again, like, and what do we do with the comedy? If you laugh by yourself, you're insane, right? But if we laugh with each other, man, you know, our burdens are halved. So hell yes to Tricksters, man, hell yes. And
Yeah.
Prometheus, by the way, was one of the originals.
Oh yeah, stole the fire, a la your book. um, we're coming to the end of what feels like an extremely short hour, because every time I speak to you, I just want more. And I think, you know what? I think it's your ideas, but it's not just your ideas. I just love the words you use, and I love the different pieces that you bring in. And I get a little enthralled with the poetry of speaking to you, which means that I'm at a risk of going into someone else's time by being like, oh, tell me more. Jamie, what are you working on now that folks should be attending to? People who maybe they've noticed you for the first time in this conversation, and like, oh, who's this guy? What's he doing? Can you tell our audience, such as it is out in Infinite Playa or on Facebook or wherever, what are you up to? Where should we be looking at you? I know you're writing a new book right now, so tell us a little bit about how we can follow you and where we should be to sync up with this poetry and knowledge.
Yeah, I mean, I'm literally writing the sequel to Stealing Fire, which was basically saying, hey, there's this revolution in altered states. It's coming. It's happening. It's kind of interesting, and that, and, you know, and since then, obviously, a lot has happened. This next book, which I'm finishing up right now and comes out in the spring, it's available, I think, on Amazon. At least it has a placeholder for it. It's called Recapture the Rapture: Rethinking God, Sex, and Death for a World That's Lost Its Mind. And in a nutshell, is to say, hey, it's like Yeats, like the best lack all conviction, while the worst are filled with passionate intensity. And a lot of the passionate worst are driving this global project of ours off a cliff. So how do we articulate basically an open source operating system for transformational culture and meaning? So basically, what is the psycho-spiritual equivalent of blockchain, using respiration, embodiment, sexuality, substances, and music as our toolkit? And how can we create ethical cults? How can we create 1,000 different transformational movements and experiences, all unique to the communities and the cultures that they arise from, that let 1,000 fires burn and hopefully light the way forward for all of us?
And we get that in the spring. We got to wait until this world needs to survive until the spring, until we get this book.
Fingers motherfucking crossed. November and January, man. If we can get through those two, we got something to talk about.
Jamie, I love you. I love your mind. I love the way you show up, and I appreciate that you showed up at our virtual BWB today to share some wisdom and a little bit of jokes. And yeah, thank you so much.
Dude, well, there's not a single organization affiliated with this celebration that I respect and appreciate more than Burners Without Borders. So super honored to spend the time.
Thank you, Jamie. This is Jamie Wheal, author of Stealing Fire and any number of beautiful talks and any number of beautiful appearances in the world. And tell me again the title of the book coming out.
Recapture the Rapture.
Recapture the Rapture. Awesome. Well, thank you, Jamie. It's been such a pleasure catching up.
Cheers.
Cheers.
Try harden ourselves up to the ones who died. Look in my eyes. Tell me the cost of the life that we're living. Armed with lies.